y'all, what's happening? Good morning, happy Monday to you. It is the Monday morning Get Up. Listen, we're ready to rock and roll, and we're ready to have a good time. Monday morning Get Up is the show where I come to you with statements, with motivation, with inspiration, where we help you think about things to move through your week with energy, with life, with just like super get up and go. All right, that's why we do what we do. So welcome to the show. If you haven't been here before, my name's Robert Kennedy III, RK3, that's me. And what we do is share with people how they can communicate and share messages with energy and life and power, right? Because a lot of us really, the reason why a lot of us go through life in the way that we do with hesitation is because we haven't yet captured or we haven't yet owned the internal power that's inside of us. And so I want to be a space. I want to create a space where you can really begin to hear that message and believe it for yourself, and then begin to own it so that you can move forward and transform and make big changes in the world. So listen, do me a favor. If you have not listened to the show before and you want to know when we go live every Monday. And as a matter of fact, I've got an announcement. I've got something to share with you, a change in our time coming up really soon. I'll tell you why in just a moment. But do me a favor, get on our text list, 410-936-4049, 410-936-4049. Yeah, you're in need of some positive communication. Love it. So glad that you're here this morning. Okay, 410-936-4049 is so that you can know when we go live every Monday. So here's the quick announcement before we get into this morning's message. Monday mornings is a good time at 10 a.m. for some people, but it's a late time for some people. We've got some people coming in from South Africa this morning, from Senegal, from a few other places. And so what we're going to be doing is we're going to be moving this message back to 8:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. I know for those of you that are on the West Coast, that's a little bit early, but you should be getting up at 5 or 5:30 anyway. And for those of you that are in England, for those of you that are in the United Kingdom, East Coast of Africa, etc., listen, or West Coast of Africa, you should have this at a good time for you. All right. So happy Monday from Belize. Good to see you this morning. All right. Please text the number 410-936-4049. If somebody can put that in the chat, if you're on, put that in the chat for me so that we can get this thing rock and rolling. So what's our message today? Our message today is a quote that I heard, and Nelson Mandela shared this quote, and he said, "It always seems impossible until it's done." It always seems impossible until it's done. And that resonates with me. And I know that this resonates with a lot of you, because here's what happens in our spaces. A lot of times we're told that something can't be done, or it shouldn't be done, or it can't be done that way. In my workshops and trainings, one of the things that I do, there's an exercise that I do where I take these ropes and I put these ropes, and this exercise is called handcuffs, right? And so there's these ropes and we put them around people's wrists. And so there are two people inside of this activity. Both people have these handcuffs around their wrist, but then we interlock the handcuffs. So when they pull it, it looks like an X. Right. So their job in this exercise is to get out of that X, get out of that conundrum without taking the handcuffs off of their wrists. Now, every time we do this, every single time we do this, without fail, people say, "Oh my gosh, Robert, it's a trick. There is no solution to this. There's no way to get out of this." And it's hilarious because, people are twisting, they're going through legs, they're jumping on tables. It's all sorts of crazy. But then people get to a point where they begin to get frustrated with it. And then they say, "Robert, this is impossible. You can't do this." And then I show them how it's done. I show them that there is a possibility. I show them that there's a way out of this. And when they see how we've done it, they start to say, "Oh my gosh, I didn't think of that." Because here's what happens. It's impossible for most of us based on our experiences. And it's impossible based on the things that we've been through. It's impossible based on our situation. It's impossible based on what we know. But if we were to think just a little bit differently, if we were to think a little bit outside of our box, and here's the challenge with a lot of us. A lot of us are thinking simply based on our own brain power, right? And the revolution or the revelation quite often happens when you combine your brain power with the brain power of others, right? So if we think back to every technology that has ever been invented, if we think back to Orville and Wilbur Wright, if we think back to the plane, and we could argue, who started the plane revolution, etc. But Orville and Wilbur are the ones in history books that are given credit for this. So if we think back to Orville and Wilbur Wright, what happens is that flight had been something that had escaped humans for all of the centuries preceding that. But it was the opportunity for the two brothers to put their brain power together that made this flight possible, right? I want to share another example. If you look at the book Think and Grow Rich, written by Napoleon Hill, one of the things that Napoleon Hill says in this book is that there are a lot of things that we can achieve on our own, but we don't really grasp or we don't really achieve the magnitude that we can achieve until we put our brains together. And he called that a mastermind. So if you can imagine sitting around a table, and this was something that Napoleon Hill observed and wrote and did. So if you can imagine sitting around a table, you had Andrew Carnegie, who was a steel magnate, who was one of the richest men in the world at that time. Sitting around that table, Andrew Carnegie, Henry Ford, right? Henry Ford. You had Thomas Edison. That's why I said Thomas, because there was a Thomas in there. You had Thomas Edison, and you had quite a few other men. So you had about 4 or 5 men around this table. And we could argue whether there should have been women at the table or not, but that's another discussion. So you had people at this table who had achieved certain levels of success, but recognized that in order to sustain that success, or in order to get to another place, they needed to be in a place where they can combine their brain power with the brain power of others. So if we think about every technology that has ever existed. All right. Thoughts are visual. James, how you doing, buddy? That's the quote on your morning mug. Yeah. If you think about every technology that's ever existed, let's think about flight. Orville and Wilbur Wright. Before they did it, somebody said it was impossible. Let's think about computers. So right now we've got this device in front of us, right? We've got this device that most of us carry on our hips all the time, or in our pocketbooks, or wherever we carry it. Decades ago, in the 1940s, in the 1950s, this device took up the space of a couple of rooms. And guess what? It did more than 1,000 times less than what this device in the palm of my hand does. At one point, somebody said, this is impossible. It's impossible to have all of that information flowing through chips that are small enough to carry in the palm of your hand. Somebody said that it was impossible. Let's think about Henry Ford in that room. At some point, somebody said it was impossible to create a vehicle that ran on its own without being pulled by a horse or something of that nature. Somebody said that was impossible. And then somebody said it was impossible to make it go faster than a certain amount of miles per hour. Right? So every time somebody says it's impossible, we think about we think about what's his first name? Bannister. Right? Bannister was his last name. I forget his first name. But until he broke the 4-minute mile, everybody said it was impossible. Right? Now, he broke it based on conditions or whatever it was, weather or track or whatever. But the moment that he broke that, the moment that he passed that invisible barrier, several weeks later, people were breaking the 4-minute mile. Why didn't anybody break it before? Right? It seems impossible. It always seems impossible until it's done. So I share that this morning, and I share those examples because I want you to think about your own space and your own life. What are the things in your life that you're looking at? What are the things in your space that you're saying to yourself mentally, I can't do that, or that's impossible for me? What are those things? Because it's one thing for other people to tell us that something's impossible. It's quite another thing for us to tell ourselves daily, repeatedly, that something's impossible. Because when we tell ourselves that thing is impossible, then we again remove ourselves, or we push ourselves that much further from actually doing it. So what are you seeing in your space that you've attached a can't to? What are you seeing in your space that you've already attached an impossible to? And what can you do about it? Because here's the thing. Anything that you think is impossible until it's done. Everything that you can think of, every technology, every convenience that you have, somebody said it was impossible until it was done. Right? TV was impossible until it was done. Photography was impossible until it was done. Listen, and some of you are going to be surprised by this, but the very pens and pencils and paper and writing that you see, seeing ink on paper, was impossible until it was done. So what is it in your space that you're holding yourself back from because you think it's impossible, because you think you can't do it? What is it in your space that you can lean into and do? What is it in your mind that you think is this crazy blue sky outer space dream that is impossible? What is that? And if you don't see anything, or if you don't hear anything, or if you don't feel anything, or if you don't dream anything, then it's not because you can't dream it. It's not because you don't have the ability to dream it. It's simply because that ability has been squeezed. I think about kids all the time. I hear grown-ups say, I'm not creative. I'm not creative, right? And the truth is that that's not the truth, right? Every single person who has ever lived is creative in some way. Yes, there are levels of creativity, but every single person has a creative bone in their body, right? And what does creative mean? It means that you have the ability to create something out of nothing, right? And what does that mean? It means that you have the ability to have ideas. It means that you have the ability to think of things that you didn't think of before. It means that you have ability to think of ways to do things that you might not have been able to do them before. It means that you may have the ability to think about something in a way that nobody else has ever thought about it before. That's what creativity is. And here's what we do as human beings. As kids, we go to kindergarten, we go to school, and we're told to draw a picture, and we're given a crayon, and we draw the pictures with the crayons, and we color the pages, and we come up with all sorts of stuff, and we color. And at some point, somebody tells us, hey, you've got to do it inside of those lines. And so we begin to color inside of the lines. Now, yes, we need some sort of structure. I'm not saying that we shouldn't follow any structure, because outside of that, life would be chaos. At some point, somebody tells us you've got to color inside of those lines. And then when they tell us to color inside of those lines, then eventually they tell us, oh, not only do you have to color inside of those lines, you have to color it that way. So I remember when my daughter was a child, when my daughter was a baby, and she would color certain things, and she would make pictures of people, and she would make some of them green and some of them purple and some of them orange. I was the orange guy. She made me orange, right? And some of them red. At some point, my daughter's coloring these. At some point, somebody says to her, hey, green people don't exist. You can't color them green. Purple people don't exist. You can't color them purple. And so we create the space where let me say it another way. Not that we create the space. We squeeze away the ability for creativity because we start telling kids, we start telling young people that you can't do it that way, or this is the only way that it's done. I remember being in corporate America, leading a team. And every time we tried to do something a certain way, every time we tried to install or do something a little bit differently, somebody invariably would say, we tried that, or we can't do it that way. That's not the way that we have done it. And so we have been brought up, or we've been acculturated to this word impossible. But if you look back at what Nelson Mandela says, it always seems impossible until it's done. It was impossible at some point to have an electric vehicle. It was impossible at some point to go to the moon. It was impossible at some point to send anybody beyond the moon, or any vehicle or anything beyond the moon to land on another planet and capture data and send it back to Earth. That was impossible at some point. It was impossible to fly into space up until this year unless you were an astronaut hired and trained by NASA. Now, the only thing that prevents it is maybe the amount of connections, relationships, and money that you have. But will it be possible to fly higher and further at some point in the future? Yeah, it will be. Because it's always impossible, or it always seems impossible until it's done. So I turn this back to you in your space, in your life, in your situation, in your circumstance. What is it that seems impossible to you right now? And what is it that you can do to move towards making it possible? That's our message for this morning. I hope that carries you through the week. I hope that takes you through this coming Friday and up to next week, Monday, because guess what? Next week, Monday, is November 1st, and we're starting up again at 8:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So don't miss this. Lock that into your calendar. Oh, do me a favor. A friend of mine, two friends of mine, we're actually doing a workshop called Magnify Your Message Full Day Workshop. I want you to do this. Go to magnifyyourmessage.live/info to get more information about that. We're going to be releasing that information shortly, and we want you to join us so that you can not only tell your stories, but that you can learn how to share your stories on a greater stage with other people, because your stories deserve a stage. Your stories are going to transform people's lives. And maybe right now you think your story is impossible, but get with us, and we're going to show you how to make that story possible and do much more with it. I'll see you next week, Monday. Changing time, 8:30 a.m. Boom, I'll see you.